Thank you, Blake, and I would like to personally add my welcome to everybody. And we're kind of excited about this because we hear from our clients, they've got a lot of new hires. So we wanted to talk about this topic. So you've got new hires, now what are you going to do in doing this? So what we're going to cover today in our agenda is we're going to talk about the state of the new hire and some research that we have done so that you get a chance and get an idea of what this really is looking like in today's world and today's economy. Now, in addition to that, we're going to talk about how does mentoring support onboarding and what we're going to be doing. And then common onboarding challenges, and believe me, we know we all have them, and then how mentoring can assist with that. We're going to actually take you through a case study and with a client that we work like where one of their challenges was information overload. And then we're going to talk about how to design an onboarding program that is supported and facilitated by mentoring. So at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through our first poll?
Sure will. For our first poll question, it's a simple one. Do you currently have a mentoring program? Yes. Perhaps you have a formal mentoring program to support multiple initiatives? Yes. Mentoring program to support your onboarding process. Maybe you have one to support no particular initiative or miscellaneous initiatives. Or do you not have a mentoring program at all? So take a few moments to fill that out. The answers are coming in. Give that a few more seconds. Okay. And the results are in. 23% say yes, we have a formal mentoring program to support multiple initiatives. 16% say there's a formal mentoring program to support onboarding. 25% have an informal mentoring program, and 36% just don't have one at all. What do you think, Judy?
Well, actually, I'm really pleased to hear about the result where 16% said they have mentoring and it supports their onboarding program. That's really great. For those of you that 23% that have a mentoring program, we're going to show you a couple of ways in which you can really use mentoring in a little different ways than what you're doing. So that's really great. Thank you very much. Okay, what we also want to talk about at this point in time is, before we go in, is talk a little bit about who we are at Insala, because this is really going to lead into how we look at mentoring as a business strategy. First of all, what we do at Insala is look at mentoring, and we look at it from a solution standpoint. And we provide consulting. We provide strategic planning workshops for organizations so that you can figure out how to tie this to business objectives, look at how you're going to measure it, and very specifically really understand all the elements that need to be in place to have a successful mentoring program so you kind of avoid those pitfalls that could come up. In addition to that, what we offer is training, and we do this for mentors, mentees, managers and supervisors, program administrators, and we do this in a webinar format, workshops, whatever best fits your organization. And then we also have our software as a service technology. This is what really ensures that sustainability of your mentoring initiative, and definitely make sure that your mentoring program does not become an administration nightmare. So as we move forward, we're going to begin by talking about the state of the new hire and looking at that. And here's some information that we acquired about, what are your new hires thinking in doing that? Well, what we found out in some work that the Aberdeen Group did was 86% of new hires make their decision to leave or stay within the first 6 months. That's pretty scary, because we know that you have put a lot of time and effort and dollars into a new hire within the first 6 months and the first year in what you're doing. Many costs of which you don't even think about, but a lot of money. So if they're making that decision within the first 6 months, you better make sure you've really engaged them and tagged them in doing that. Another fact from the Aberdeen Group was that 89% of new hires say they do not have the optimum level of knowledge and tools necessary to do their job. So that's definitely going to then relate to that 86% that don't know if they're going to stay in that first 6 months. And then another piece that we learned from SHRM was half of all hourly workers leave their new jobs within the first 120 days. Now, you may think in terms of hourly workers that, well, you know, it's maybe minimum wage or those kinds of things. But, you know, you start adding those up, and that's a lot of dollars, and it's a lot of work that is involved in interviewing and bringing people on board and teaching them the job. And in addition to that, you know, there's an awful lot of hourly workers that have very, very checks on what they're doing in going forward. So don't negate the information about those hourly workers. Now what we want to talk about is we've talked about here's what the new hires are thinking. Well, you know, what's the average cost then of replacing a new hire? And the figures we're going to talk about came from the Center for American Progress, and they're pretty, you know, enlightening in what you're doing. 16% of annual salaries for jobs earning less than $30,000 per year. So this is what it costs. 16% of that $30,000 is what it costs to replace a new hire in doing that. Now, for jobs that run between $30,000 and $50,000, kind of those mid-range, it costs the organization 20% of their annual salary and being able to do that. So you're looking at somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000, and what do we do if that leaves every, you know, within 6 months? And then up to 213% for those executive positions that you're looking at. This becomes very important because it seems that within an organization we spend an awful lot of money on those executive decisions or positions in doing that, and we think about that because of the cost involved. But if you have got, you know, 10 or 15 individuals in that mid-range area that are leaving the organization, you've added up to a very large executive annual salary in what you're doing, or even 16% of looking at those individuals that may be earning less than $30,000. There's a lot of money that's involved here, and so this onboarding becomes very, very important to an organization and in what they're doing and you know, taking this forward. Here's a great quote that we got that came from Korn Ferry, and it says, new employees who attend a well-structured onboarding program are 69% more likely to stay with an organization after 3 years. So the point is, all that money that you invested in them long term in that first 6 months or that first year, this investment's going to stay with you in what you're doing. And so it's kind of like this is the other side of the coin. So you want to make sure that you've got those employees that want to stay after 3 years. So how does mentoring support onboarding? Well, actually it's good for everybody in what you're going to be doing and taking this forward. Now, the way that it's good for the new hire is a mentor actually can start that new hire off on the right foot and successfully integrate them into the organization and really give them a great first impression of the organization. It also helps increase the employee's self-confidence because it's great as an employee to walk into an organization and really begin to know people and really feel like there's somebody in this organization that's focused on me. I'm getting individualized attention. You know, and for most of us, the last time we got individualized attention was somewhere around kindergarten or first grade, and then all of a sudden you're lost in the masses. But if you're having a new hire and they've got a mentor, that mentor is focusing very specifically on them, and it really does help increase that employee's self-confidence in what they're doing. The mentor also can identify and mentor that new hire on missing skills and impart knowledge and expertise. And what's really great about that, it's not just looking at missing skills and that knowledge area, but it's how those skills are used within a particular organization and its culture. We all have experienced situations in which you had certain skills in what you were doing and you used them at one organization and you're ready to jump into a new organization you're in and you find that those same skills are used a little differently. They're accepted a little differently. They're implemented a little differently. So isn't it great to have somebody that can help you with that organization's culture and what you're doing? It also helps to enhance professional development because again, I am starting out as a new hire and I'm starting out right, and so I am enhancing my professional development all the way around. Now, when you're looking at how mentoring can support an onboarding program and the benefits of that, for the mentor themselves, actually what it does is the relationship functions as a two-way street. In fact, many times we talk about the fact that this is a partnership between the mentor and mentee, and they learn from each other. And we hear this all the time from our mentors, saying that they really learned a lot from their mentee. And especially if this person's a new hire, they're kind of providing some fresh perspective and some fresh ideas to the mentor. And, you know, it may be there's certain things they learned from a previous organization, they learned from as a graduate, maybe some new techniques and so on. And so this really helps the mentor to get a different perspective and some fresh ideas in what they were doing. It also helps the mentor because the mentor gets some positive recognition and reinforcement from that new hire, because the new hire really feels very good about having a mentor. They're really thankful for having a mentor, so there's some positive recognition there. But what's also happening is that individual who's in that mentor role and is helping others, they get an intrinsic reward as well as the fact that they're kind of positioned within the organization as somebody you want to be a part of and somebody that you want to associate with. So they end up getting a lot of positive recognition and reinforcement through several areas. And then when we're thinking about how an onboarding program supported by mentoring can help the organization, well, here's some things the organization gets out of it. First of all, it provides new hires with an understanding of that organization's culture. They don't have to stub their toe. I mentioned this before. They don't have to wonder what's going on, but they get integrated into the organization's culture just like everybody else and very quickly. It also engenders employee loyalty, because if I come in as a new hire and I've got this sense that the organization cares enough about me as a new hire that they're going to supply me with a mentor, you know, that makes me a whole lot more engaged with the organization and my sense of loyalty to that organization because they have invested in me. In addition to that, it also, not just from the new hire standpoint, but the mentor, because they have invested their time, they've invested in that new hire, and it gives them, even the mentor, a sense of more loyalty to the organization and what they've done. Also, what it does is it helps the organization protect that investment in the recruiting process, because there's a lot of money that is put into the recruiting process, and not just if you have a recruitment portion of the organization, the work that they do, but think about all the individuals that have been involved in the interviewing. It, you know, could be a group interview, it could be an individual that's interviewing. Think about all their time that they've invested, and their time meaning dollars as they've invested. So again, really helps the organization to protect that investment in the new hire. And then one of the things that we definitely have learned through several clients that we've worked with, through several organizations over 23 years, is that when you assign a new hire with a mentor, it improves their time to productivity. That, you know, learning curve is decreased, and one of the best things that begins to happen is the new hire begins to understand things and gets up to speed a whole lot faster in being able to do that. So at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through our next poll?
It would be my pleasure. For our next poll question, what's the biggest challenge that onboarding presents to your organization? Is it that overloading new hires with information is a concern? Are you concerned about delays in offering onboarding as new hires come in? Could the time frame for onboarding be too short to actually be effective? Or do you simply not have any accountability or metrics to actually measure their success? Or other. And if you enter other, please take a moment and enter some feedback in the questions box, because we're interested to hear about your challenges. Take a few moments to enter that. Results are coming in. Give that a few more seconds. Great. And here's the results. 39% said they were concerned with overloading new hires with too much information. 15% said that delays in offering onboarding were the primary issue. No one, 0%, said that the time frame is too short to be ineffectual. 37% reported no accountability or metrics, and 9% had other. All right, Judy, what do you think about that?
Actually, the 39% on overload, that's one of the biggest things that we see, and also that 37% on metrics. These are very common. It's exactly the types of things that we see. So let's talk about some of those and in doing that. So one of the things that we're going to talk about as we go forward in these challenges and how mentoring can assist, and we're going to start with that first one, overload for new hires. And I think the reason that we all look at that one and we can relate to it, because we've all been in it. We have all been in a situation where you've joined a new organization and there is a massive amount of information that's coming to you in doing that. And the first thing you think is, am I going to remember all this as you go forward? So yeah, we know that. And then, delays in offering onboarding. In doing this. Sometimes we see that happen in organizations because you may have people coming in at different times. So if you're waiting for a larger group to come in, the 2 or 3 people that came in ahead of that end up waiting for that. So that delay in offering onboarding. And then time frame too short. And it was kind of interesting that it was a 0% on this, because quite honestly, this is another one that we've seen where the time frame for the onboarding is just too short in doing that. It could be anything. Some organizations might spend a week, and other organization might spend, here's the desk, here's the computer, here's your coworkers, and go for it. And that's what they get. And then, but the 37% of no metrics, yeah, many times organizations do not even consider how they should measure the onboarding program, and not only don't do it, but don't know how to do it and taking it forward. So let's kind of think about then how mentoring could help in each of these challenges. Well, first of all, the best thing on that overload is a mentor can support the new hire with all that information, because again, we all relate to this and we all remember what it was like to get all this information coming at it, and that feeling of, am I going to remember all this? And the feeling of I don't want to go to my manager because they're going to think I'm silly, and why didn't I get this in the onboarding and the orientation program I went in, whatever. But if I've got a mentor that's focused on me, then I'm going to feel a whole lot more comfortable, because that mentor is not, I don't have any reporting relationship to that mentor. So I can feel more comfortable going to that mentor if I forget something, or, I just need to do, am I thinking correctly? Did I hear this correctly? So, having a mentor and in your onboarding program really can help with that overload of new hires. Now, when you talk about the delays in offering onboarding, one of the things that can happen is that, mentoring can start immediately. So it's not one of those things where if you've got individuals that come in at different times that you only offer onboarding or orientation or all those types of formal programs until you've got a large amount, because mentoring can start right away in being able to do that as soon as I walk in the door. Now, too short of a time frame, and again, we've seen organizations where their orientation or onboarding program is anywhere from a week to, looking at, as I said, here's your desk, here's your computer, and introduced to the coworkers. Well, a mentoring partnership can be really any timeline you want. And so it's not really, worried about, is it too long, is it too short, whatever, because the mentoring partnership can be 6 months, whatever, or it could be longer. Maybe you only want it for 4 months. It could be 4 months or 6 months or longer. It could be 8, 10, 12 months in what you're doing. So it depends on your program, depends on your organization. It depends many times on the complexity of the new hire and what they're going to be going into. So it definitely is a solution. And then that challenge of no metrics or accountability. Formal mentoring programs can be, and we believe should be, measured in what they're doing. In fact, we have several areas in which that time to productivity from a quantitative standpoint to more satisfied employees on a qualitative standpoint, formal mentoring programs can be, and we believe should be, measured. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about that, and we're going to actually take you through a case study that we had. And the problem here that this client had was that common information overload, the same one that most of you identified in doing that. What was happening is that typically new hires were receiving too much information at once during the onboarding, and the company needed to share accurate and crucial information with these new hires, but how could they do that without overwhelming them? Well, here's what we presented and implemented as a solution in doing that. First of all, we made sure the mentors were qualified in doing that. And you want to make sure in your onboarding program, if you've got a mentor, that they're able to provide the very best first impression of the organization and being able to do that, because we all remember those first impressions of the organization and what we're doing. So making sure that you had qualified mentors to be able to do that. Second, what we did was we created that qualification criteria and ensured that all the mentors really understood what their role was and the specific information that they were to impart, and in some ways weren't responsible for imparting. We're working with one client right now, and their mentors are really working on this organizational cultural mentoring, but they're very clear about the fact that this is not, you're not going to be training that new hire on the job. You're talking more about the organization in what you're doing. So again, really making clear to the mentors what they, information they are going to impart and what they don't have to worry about imparting and doing that. We also suggested they have 2 mentors. And this goes back to the example I just gave you. First of all, there's that one mentor for the organizational culture focus in what they're doing. And then there was a second mentor for that job-specific focus. So what it did was you had 2 really different layers of mentors that were doing this, because your mentors that were looking at the cultural focus were more looking at, this is what the organization is all about. This is the history of the organization. This is how it has evolved and become what it is. So on and so forth. This is how, when you're working with the organization, you kind of, network through, and so on and so forth as you do that. Those types of things somebody with a job-specific focus may not have. Now, the other side of that is, though, the individual who's working on the culture focus doesn't have to have, and many times may not have, information about that is job-specific. So it just makes sense to have 2 different mentors. One that's going to focus on the culture and one that's going to focus on the job. Many times the organization provides, some type of buddy or this type of thing that helps an individual, but they kind of expect them to do both, and that doesn't always work in taking that forward. And then, the purpose of the partnership was information sharing. And so we made sure that mentors, managers, and definitely the new hires knew what the objective of the mentoring partnership was. So they understood very clearly exactly what the objective was and was they were going forward. Here were the results, and as we took them through this process. First of all, there was a decrease in complaints from the managers because the managers were getting a lot of questions that they felt should have been covered in the orientation or should have been covered with somebody helping them on the job. So there was a decrease in complaints from manager. There was a reduction in dollars that were spent on new hires because, part of what was happening is people were getting up to speed faster in what they were doing, and, they're using internal resources to help them get up to speed. There was also a reduction in follow-up phone calls and emails to HR because they had put all this information out to the individual, but then what was happening is they were getting all of these calls back. Now, some of them were very specific and they needed to handle those, but there was a great reduction in those number of calls. So what they were finding is they could concentrate on some other issues and not worry about the things that were going to be happening with the new hire because someone else was helping them with that, doing that. There was also a reduction in new hire frustration because the new hires through employee surveys and these types of survey documents were indicating that new hires were much happier, and there was a definite reduction in new hire frustration, which then all of these things added up to an increase in new hire satisfaction. And it was not only increase in the new hire satisfaction, but it was increase in the satisfaction from the managers and from the HR team. So everybody all the way around. So all these things have to actually be able to do that. So at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through our next poll?
Sure will. For our third and final poll question, how effective would you say your own onboarding process is? On a scale from not effective at all to highly effective, go ahead and take a moment to rate that. All right, give that a few more seconds as the last few votes trickle in. Great. The results are 6% think that their onboarding process is highly effective, 38% say mostly effective, 34% say somewhat effective, 17% say mostly effective, mostly ineffective, and 4% say not effective at all. Judy, what do you think that indicates?
Okay, I would say that there, except for that 6% that says it was highly effective, and I think mentoring, supporting that could even help that, and it might be those individual ones that we found out in the very beginning that talked about the fact that as they went through it, there were those individuals that 16% said that they had a mentoring program that supported their onboarding and what they were doing. So hopefully that's where that 6% came from. But for those of you that, are saying, okay, it could be better or it's got to get better, whatever it is, we're going to take you through a process and talk about how to build an onboarding program that is facilitated and supported by mentoring in doing this. So as we go through this and take you through this process, the first thing we're going to talk about, and we always talk about this when it comes to a mentoring program, is making sure you define the objectives and goals of the program and what it is you want to be able to accomplish. And so let me give you some examples of what some of those goals might look like. One of them might be to provide new employee guidance in what you're doing. The other one might be to increase retention of new hires and what you're doing. Now, I will tell you, when it comes to measurements, many times we suggest to organizations that they don't use retention as a measurement because there can be a whole lot of reasons why people leave an organization that has nothing to do that mentoring can help. But when it comes to looking at onboarding and new hires, I can tell you that there is a way look at retention that way. Remember those original things that we talked about. It said people leave an organization before the end of 6 months or before the end of a year, but they make those decisions within 6 months. So I would say retention is one of those things you can look at from the standpoint of being able to measure an onboarding. And then that increased time to productivity and accelerating the learning curve. I can tell you that this is one of the most common areas in where we find that mentoring is used with onboarding and being able to, again, accelerate that learning curve, getting people up to speed. With one organization specifically, we were able to reduce their time to productivity from 18 months to 13 months in what you're doing. I mean, that's an incredible savings in dollars that we're going to be spent with individuals in doing that. So the first thing, again, you got to do is define those goals and objectives. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is to identify mentors and let them know what their roles are in doing that. And part of what we talked about was making sure you qualified your mentors, but they need to understand their roles to be able to do that. And we really see the role of the mentor, looking at this kind of generally in kind of 4 different areas. And one is they're going to be involved in planning. They're going to work with a new hire, find out what their needs are, help them set some goals with that new hire mentee, and create some kind of a plan that everybody can follow and go forward. And also maybe even at that point in time help them to think about a career path that they're going to go through. In addition to that, the mentor is going to provide guidance and assistance, and that's part of what we know in doing that. The mentor is going to help the new hire with those skills and competencies and effective behaviors that are needed to function within that specific organization and its culture. They also, many times the mentor can provide opportunities for the mentee to interact with different areas of the organization, so they get to find different areas of the organization faster. Or, they can assist the mentee in becoming associated with individuals throughout the organization. So again, it gets them integrated into the organization a whole lot faster. One of the other areas is the mentor is going to be giving evaluation and feedback. And they're going to, it may not be a formal evaluation or performance appraisal, we're not meaning that, but the point is they're going to be able to give that new hire feedback on how they're doing and their status and what they're doing, and provide feedback on how the new hire, the new mentee is doing and what their progress is, and begin to identify those motivation factors that the mentee has and recognize some of their successes. And then, of course, what's going to happen is they're going to be communicating. And because, they're spending a lot of time with the mentee, they're really bringing them up to speed in what they're doing. They're going to act as a source of information about the organization, the mission, the vision of the organization, and its goals in doing that. And, they're going to be spending a lot of time with this mentee and communicating a lot of information, and it's got to be that good first impression that we talked about. So again, if you're going to have someone that is going to be a mentor for this new hire, make sure you qualify. Make sure that they really understand the planning, providing guidance, assistance, giving evaluation and feedback, and communicating that they're going to be involved in it and exactly what their role is in doing that. So then what you want to do is you want to make sure you can match participants based on very specific criteria in what you're doing. So if you're in a situation and that matching and pairing is with a mentor and new hire around organizational culture, then you want to think about the number of years in the organization the mentor has. You want to think about the specific business function they're in, and also where they're located. Now, one of the things that we believe highly in is the concept of distance mentoring, and the fact that in distance mentoring you can get to know parts of the organization you probably never would have gotten to meet before. But when you're looking at new hires, location may be an issue you want to look at. The individual mentor and mentee don't have to be in the same building, but making sure they can get together, and at all possible that there's situations in which they can do that. Now, if you're looking at a mentor who's in the job skill area, that type of mentor for the new hire. Think about the career level of the mentor. Think about the business function they're in. And also remember the specific skills and competencies that are needed in that job, and how that can be related to the new hire. And then again, you need to think about location. If this is very specifically around job skill development, chances are that mentor needs to be in pretty close location to the mentee and what they're doing. So again, what you need to do, and you need to determine when to introduce that mentor. So, we've matched them together, you've identified them, you've matched them together. Now determine when to introduce that mentor to them. So if it's in that organizational culture, that particular mentor needs to be introduced at the very beginning of the onboarding process. Remember, they're making that great first impression, and that mentor needs to be able to provide a warm, positive experience and give them support from day one in what they're going to be doing. This particular type many times is not tied to formal training on the job. So, it can start, that partnership can start right away in what you're doing. Now, if you're looking at that job skill development mentor, that individual, you don't want to introduce them until after some formal training may have taken place when they're starting the job. One of the things many organizations do is they may take an individual through some formal training and then introduce them to their mentor, which can help them very specifically reinforce that formal learning they got and take it to real-world experiences in doing that. Because what can happen is I've gotten all this formal training in what I'm doing, but I need to know what that looks like in a real-world situation. And so my mentor can help me do that and provide me with some guidance and support, so I don't feel like after I've gone through the formal training I'm just kind of thrown out there in what I do. Next, what you want to look at is provide online information and examples, because you want to make sure there's some reinforcement. So make sure that you provide some information to them, but that it's accessible. And the reason you want to do that is to make sure that, once again, you kind of reinforce their role and clarify their role of the mentee, and also the role of the mentor. And they many times can go back maybe and look at a profile of the mentor that they're with, and so it helps them to learn even more about that mentor, and just making information about the entire mentoring partnership and function, making it accessible for individuals. And we all know that being able to do that online is usually one of the best ways to do that, and having that there. And then last, what we want to talk about, and we talked about this before, you've got to be able to measure what it is you have achieved in your onboarding program supported by mentoring. You've got to be able to measure what you've achieved. And, you can go about that through feedback surveys taken by the mentoring participants, and that many times can be what we call your qualitative type measurement. You can also get some feedback from managers, how they feel the mentee has developed in what they're doing. And again, you're probably looking at a survey to do this, but it's qualitative. But then when you get to that quantitative measurement, you can look at the learning plan they've put together, what it is, the goals and objectives they're working on, and what's the completion rate to those goals and objectives. What's been achieved in being able to do that. And that very much is looking at it from a quantitative standpoint in what you're doing. So kind of as a review on how to build that onboarding program that's facilitated and supported by mentoring, make sure you define the goals and objectives in what you're going to be doing. Identify and qualify those mentors and make sure they understand their respective roles. Match participants based on specific criteria, making sure that if it's a organizational and cultural type of mentoring, that could be one set of criteria, and if it's job specific, that could be another. Determine when to introduce the mentor, and again, if it's organizational and culture, you might want to make sure that they're on day one, as soon as that new hire walks in the door. And if it's around job skill, then wait until they actually are on the job. They've gotten some formal training and they're actually on the job and what they're doing. Provide online information so that at any point in time the mentee or the mentor can go back and review all the things about the program. And then make sure you can measure, qualitatively and quantitatively exactly what it is that you have been able to achieve in this onboarding program. So some final thoughts we want to bring. Onboarding needs to focus on the cultural part of the organization as well as just on the job. In addition to that, the secret to a successful onboarding is making sure there's structure and reinforcement, and that you can get from ensuring that you've got a mentor and mentoring that supports your onboarding. That personal touch throughout onboarding is always the most effective, and the new hire gets that by having a mentor that is assigned to them and somebody that they can go to and somebody they can always talk to as they need to. And remember, what you do now with that new hire and how you do it makes the difference in whether that individual stays with the organization, and it's that 1, 3, and 10 years down the line as they're going forward. So at this point in time, we'd like to, reinforce some of the things we've talked about. And, if you're considering a mentoring solution either right now or a little bit further down the line, we on our website have made an overview of Insala's mentoring software options, and if you would like to know more about those, be sure and let us know in the chat box. And therefore a link is going to be there, and you can click and take a look. All these things are on our mentoring website, and again, we look at mentoring from a solution standpoint. We'd also like to invite you to join our LinkedIn group, the Mentoring Thought Leaders Club. If you do that and you join the club, you'll get access to today's slides. Those will be made available after the webinar, as well as ongoing discussions about mentoring challenges and best practices in a community of peers, because we do have over 750 people that are members of our club. We get a lot of discussion going on what they're going to be doing. There's currently a link where you can join the group in the chat box, so we encourage you also to click on that link and take a look. And lastly, we also have a lot of blogs and articles around the subject of mentoring. There's a few in particular that we think are relevant to today's topic of onboarding, and we've gone ahead and made those available as hyperlinks in that chat box also. So take a look, and without further ado, let's launch the question and answer portion. So Blake, will you help take us through those questions that exist?
Yeah, we got a lot of good questions today, good audience engagement. The first one's just an issue of clarification. You talked about orientation and onboarding. Are orientation and onboarding the same, or is orientation part of onboarding? What's the distinction there?
That's a really good question, and as I was talking about that, and the reason I use that term orientation and onboarding is that some organizations consider orientation to be their onboarding. Now, from my standpoint, I think that orientation is a function of onboarding, that's part of what happens. But the reason I use both those terms is because some organizations consider the orientation program that they have to be their onboarding program in doing that. But I think the mere function of orienting an individual to the organization, its culture, and to the HR do's and don'ts of what you're doing is part of onboarding. But that was the reason I used both of those terms in doing that.
Great. Here's one. How frequently should a mentor meet with a new hire? And then what are the recommendations in terms of, how often at that point? Should it be once per week, once a month? Should there be ad hoc availability? And then, amidst meetings, how do we keep from overloading mentors?
There you go, yeah. Great question. In other words, it's kind of like, we're worried about overloading the new hire, but how do we make sure we don't overload the mentors in doing that? Well, I'm going to answer the second part of that first in doing that. Well, the best way that you can make sure you don't overload your mentors is, first of all, make sure they understand what it is you expect from them. Now, as far as how often mentors should meet with the new hires in the beginning, I think that if a mentor can meet with that new hire for an hour a week. In the first few weeks that they're there, that's ideal. And the reason for that is that's when the biggest questions, that's when the biggest concerns, that's where, the biggest amount of fear of a new hire comes into take. So if a mentor is able to meet for, say, 1 hour a week for, say, the first month or so, that's ideal. That's absolutely ideal in being able to do that. And then it's going to kind of have to be up to the mentor. I mean, they're going to have to kind of do a check themselves and in being that. And they may find that, the new hire is still having a problem. And if there's anything that they can do, then maybe what they want to do is continue that 1 hour a week for another month. If not, then go to maybe an hour every other week and being able to do that. Keeping in touch. And so, again, I would say you need to make sure not to overload your mentors by making sure that you don't use the same mentors over and over and over and over again. Give them a break in doing that. Talk to your mentors and find out some of the things that they did that worked the best for them and make some of those your best practices in doing that. But that can be a real challenge, making sure you don't overload the mentors as well as a new hire. So I would say make sure they understand what their role is, what they need to do, what they don't need to do in doing that. What questions need to go specifically to the manager. That's not the mentor's role in doing that. Make sure they understand the do's and the don'ts of their role, and make sure they understand that before they volunteer to be a mentor. One of the things we find in a lot of organizations is they go out and they ask for mentors, and then they tell them what the job description is after they've signed up to be a mentor. And it's kind of like, well, that's not fair. I need to know about the job before I decide to take it on. You don't normally post a job after you've hired somebody for it. You post it beforehand. So good question. Good question.
Thanks, Judy. Here's a good one. Now, if the mentor is actually going to be reporting on the new hire's progress, how can the mentor make sure that this is perceived by the mentee as a good, constructive, and relationship of trust and not just one of surveillance?
Yeah, and that is a good question. I definitely want to make a some information there about the fact that when I use the term giving them feedback and progress, I was not talking about a performance appraisal, and I was not talking about providing that to the mentee's manager. What I was talking about is one of the things that always happens in any kind of mentoring partnership is the mentee is going to say, well, how do you think I'm doing? And that's the kind of feedback and progress that we're talking about. This is the conversation between the mentor and the mentee. When we talk about a mentoring partnership, we talk about the fact that confidentiality is absolutely prime in a mentor-mentee partnership in doing that. We talk about the fact that neither the mentor or the mentee should make the promise that, whatever we talk about between us will always be kept confidential. Because guess what? Neither one of them may be able to live up to that, especially in a situation where sometimes you forget exactly what the employee rules are in doing that. So don't make that flat statement. But what you should talk about, and the mentor and mentee should talk about, is, okay, what if the mentee's manager does come to the mentor and ask how the mentee's doing, the new hire mentee is doing? They need to talk about that. And the new hire may say, hey, I'm okay with it. You can do that. Or the mentee new hire may say, I think that's great. You can talk to my manager, but I'd like to be a part of that conversation. I'd like to be included in that conversation because that new hire mentee does not want to feel like there's conversations going on behind their back. So again, I want to be very specific about the fact when I talk about giving feedback on the progress of the mentee, we're talking about the conversation between the mentor and the mentee, not reporting that progress to someone else.
Great. Now, in the case of a two-mentor model, let's say when you have a mentor for culture and then a more job-specific trainer-type mentor, how do you differentiate and kind of distribute responsibility among the two different mentors?
Yeah, good question, and it very specifically has to do with the job. In other words, and that's why it's much better to have somebody be the organizational and the cultural mentor that is outside of the individual's job function and being able to do that, because if they bring up something specific about the job, the mentor's not going to know anyway what those answers are. So if you can make that decision, if you have a mentor who's within their job function, it doesn't work as well. I can tell you that right now, because there does seem to be some of that crossover. But the mentor needs to very clearly understand, here's the kind of questions you're liable to get, and give them a listing of those. And you can answer those. And when it comes to these questions, it has to do specifically about how do I perform this job function, or how do I do this. That's not their role in doing that. Same thing having to do with the job specific mentor. They're only going to be answering questions specifically around the job. And when it comes to some of the HR issues, or it comes to some of those organizational types of things, about how do you do this within the organization and so on, and then that's not what they're going to be doing. So the best way to make sure that that happens is make a list of the most common questions that come up from your new hires and say, these go to the cultural mentor and these go to the job specific mentor. It's the easiest way to do it, and you don't have to have every single one, but you'll have a pattern there.
Great, thank you. Last couple are really questions about statistics and how we calculated some of the figures we discussed. First one is, we talked about the cost of replacement. What are the factors that go into that calculation? And then same thing for time to productivity improvements.
Okay, let's talk about the hire, or the dollars involved in a new hire. This actually is a situation that most people don't even think about. You have to think about the investment of dollars that have already been spent on an individual, and there has been a lot of research that's been done that the highest amount that you spend on an individual is within the first year. So you start making a list, thinking about, what have you trained? What amount of time and dollars have been spent training this individual? What's the salary you've paid them over the length of time that they've been there? What about benefits and these types of things that are involved? The organization has had to put this money out, because remember that the employee may have certain benefits taken out of their paycheck, but the organization is also funding a certain percentage of those benefits. So think about those types of things that are involved. And probably the one that is least thought about is around recruitment. In doing that. And literally you not only have your recruitment staff, but think about all the others that are involved in the interviewing process. And if you actually took that and you put a dollar sign to it, and an hourly rate to that, what would that come up to? So these are all the types of things you've got to think about when you talk about what it cost for somebody to leave the organization at the end of the first year. And again, we're not talking about somebody that comes in and wrecks the place, but this didn't work out. And I remember working with one organization, and their comment was, well, yeah, but it's part of what we budgeted for anyway. And I thought, geez, what a horrible way to think about it, because if you had $100,000 yourself and you gave it to an individual to invest that money for you, you're not interested at the end of a year to get less money back than what you originally invested. You're not even real interested in getting, the same amount that you invested. You want to know that you invested that money for a long-term results, and for the future of doing that. So that's part of what happens in doing that. Now, on to the second part of the question, which was measuring. Very specifically, this one particular client we worked with, they knew exactly that it took approximately 18 months to bring somebody up to speed in this particular position. It was a fairly technical sales position, and they knew it took approximately 18 months. They knew what their costs were, so you've got to find out what those are in all those areas that we've talked about. And then when we were able to reduce that to 13 months to be able to do that, they knew exactly what that cost was. You got to think about a lot of these factors, and then very easily you can measure what some of those differences are. I hope that answered the question for this individual.
Thanks so much, Judy. Looks like we're about out of time now. Any final thoughts?
No, I just want organizations to think about mentoring a little bit outside the box. That it isn't always just used for career development in what you're doing, but have your mentoring program work for you. And one of the best places it can work for you is in your onboarding program and making sure that you're starting everything out right in what you're doing. And I'd just like to thank everybody. Be sure and join us on our website and in our blogs, and be sure and join us in our Thought Leaders Club and what we're doing. Thank you for your participation.
As Judy said, thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email us at info@ensala.com. We very much value your feedback on our webinars. Thanks again for coming, and have a great day.